Hi, Vlad here. Welcome back to the 9th video of the Sublime Spotify series. This video is going to be a little bit different because the plugin is already done. So in this video, we're just going to talk about architecture and about the technology stack that we have been using. So what's an architecture? I'm not going to define it properly. Architecture is basically the structure. Right, the structure of the application. That's all we need for this video. And I'm saying all those things because I don't know who's watching, so you might be completely new to software. A technology stack is pieces of different software, of different programs that you use to build your applications. So there are a few very popular stacks, and these stacks are for building web applications. So one of them is called LAMP, which is an acronym for Linux, the operating system, Apache, the HTTP server, M stands for MySQL, which is a database, and P stands for PHP, which is a programming language. The other one is, for example, the mean stack, which is very popular these days, which stands for MongoDB, which is a database, Express, which is a way to serve your HTTP API. The A stands for AngularJS, which is a front-end technology, and Node.js, which is a backend technology. So in our case, we didn't have much choice because we were writing a plugin, right? And usually when you write plugins, you're already sort of forced to use particular technologies. In our case, it's Sublime, it's Python, it's the Spotify web API. So usually when you build a company, or you're about to have a project, usually you sit down, you try to figure out the problem, and then you try to figure out a solution, and then you play around with different technologies. You try to evaluate them and decide which ones to use. As I already said, in our case it's different. We were already given some sort of we were already given technologies. So what I want to do in this video is to go through them a little bit, and maybe to give you some pointers what to expect, what things I believe could be improved in those technologies, and maybe also some common misconceptions. I'm not planning on editing this video a lot. I want this to be kind of like a blogging kind of thing, and I've never done this kind of thing before, so let's see how it goes. So there are 4 areas that I want to talk about today. So the first one is, as I said, the architecture or the structure of the plugin, just a little bit, and then basically Spotify, Sublime, and Python. So let's get started. So what I have here is Sublime open, was the whole plugin, was the whole tree. Actually, let me open the entire tree because we don't have that many files. So I think I counted them, and I think it's 26 files in total, which some people might say that it's over-engineered for a plugin, and I actually totally agree. It's just that I'm used to building relatively big systems, and what I'm trying to do on this channel is to show how to apply best software engineering practices which scale. And scale means that they can be applied to big applications, but it's also important that they can also be applied to small applications. Sublime kind of encourages you to put everything into one file. I'm going to get to that later. So if you only had one file, one Python file, basically this one, Spotify Web, if we put everything inside of there, then our whole development process would have gone a bit smoother, right? Because of the whole reloading issue. So I want to kind of point out what value would you have if you would actually split things out a bit when you write code, even though it's a tiny plugin, right? It could have worked if we just smashed everything together in one file, which is, by the way, how I built it the first time. I just wanted to get it to work. This is how prototypes are built. Anyway, so one of the values is that if you split out things like this, then all of a sudden you will notice sometimes that you have less options to choose from. So basically the architecture sort of guides you to less decision making. I'm going to give you 2 examples. So Sublime has a way, has an API for scheduling things. Let's go back to our main file actually. And remember when the plugin is loaded, actually I'm not on Unix. Hold up, I'm gonna zoom it a little bit. Okay, so when the plugin is loaded, we'll do a few things, but then we say Sublime set timeout async, and after 5 seconds we run this function, run main loop. Okay, so this is a Sublime API. Notice that somewhere else, right? Somewhere else in the, I don't know, in the server, for example. Let's go there. Server. Over here, at some point, we say block thread until Spotify responds. And this is a function over here. And before we actually block the current thread, we also set up a timer for a circuit breaker, right? So this timer over here, we start it, and then if all goes well, we cancel it. So all of a sudden, we have two APIs that accomplish the same things. But we're sort of forced, right? Because, let's say somebody else decided that this is the architecture that we're going with, somebody else on the team decided, okay, hey, this is what we're doing. Then imagine as a developer who goes into this project, who goes into this folder, says, okay, so I'm over here, I'm writing this module, right? And over here, you don't know anything about Sublime, right? So you don't have access to the Sublime API. I mean, technically, all of this isn't Sublime, right? So we can just go up and say, import Sublime, and call the same API, and it would still work. But this is another thing. This is a, this is related to Python and the way that it's it's dynamic, and the way this whole the way the plugins are integrated into Sublime because of the decision that the Sublime team made. This is possible, but technically it shouldn't be possible to do something like this. So basically, all of a sudden, you don't have any decision to make, right? Okay, we need to schedule something. How do you do something like this in Python? You Google, you find this timer thing, and you're good to go, right? So no time waste. Another thing, which is very similar to this. I remember in the client, let's close this one. In the client, we went to we use Spotify, okay, and Spotify needs, when we instantiate the Spotify auth object, we give it the cache path, right? And if we act as if we're not inside of Sublime, which we're not, we try, which I try to split it out as much as possible. There's a folder called Spotify, and there's a folder called Sublime. And right now we're in a folder called Spotify, so we're not gonna try to access any Sublime APIs. However, if we did have access to a Sublime API, we could, for example, put the cache token into the user folder, right? And this way, every time we would deploy a new version of the plugin, the cache token wouldn't need to be replaced because it would be sort of completely outside, right? Which is a trade-off. It's kind of better, right? It would limit us a little bit as developers because if we wanted to fix a bug, or maybe there was something wrong with the cache token or something, it would be kind of easier if it was in our folder. It wouldn't be impossible, right? But it would be kind of easy if we had control of this over this, because as of it is right now, what can we do? In this case, what options do we have? We can either write it straight into the Spotify folder, right? Or we can go up into source over here. Over here. Or we can go up until our main folder, right? So we're still in our folder, right? We're not outside, so we're still inside of our project. And going beyond that is basically just silly because you never know where this folder is going to be. I mean, in our case, we know exactly where it's going to be. It's a plugin for Sublime. As I said, it's a bit over-engineered, but technically, think about this. Let's say you're new to Python and you want to play around with something, and you found out my videos, for example, so you sort of know how to do a few things in Python. You sort of know how to play with the Spotify API. What would happen if you would just take this folder, the source Spotify folder, and maybe the lib folder, just two folders, and put them into your project, right? All of a sudden, you have access to this, right? And you can completely instantiate this because nothing over here requires you to use Sublime. Nothing over here says Sublime. Again, partly it's a Python issue, right? Not an issue, it's a Python feature because Python has duck typing. So so for example, this thing, it looks like a settings manager for Sublime, but technically it's not, right? It's just a class that that has a client ID method, client secret method redirect port. Anyway, what I wanted to say is that usually you would see that based on the imports. So there are no imports to Sublime. But since we're in Python, there could be something, and we wouldn't see just because of the imports. Okay, this is all I wanted to say. So all I wanted to say was this: that even though we're in a tiny project, it is still worth to separate things out, right? Because there's still value. All right, so the next topic that I want to talk about is Spotify. There are basically just a few things. One is about the documentation, which I thought was really good. But documentation is one of those things that you can never get perfect. There are always things to improve, which is why in one of my previous videos that I'm going to link up here, I said when I encourage you to contribute to open source projects. I mean, Spotify is not an open source project, but it's a good example, right? I said that if you want to contribute to open source project, start with documentation. People would love you forever. Okay, so to be a bit more precise and to be a bit more picky, let's go to the Spotify documentation. So we are at developer.spotify.com/web-api/user-guide/ dash rate limiting. So it's this div over here. Right, so we're here, web API user guide, blah blah blah, and we're here at rate limiting. And what I would expect is that you would see exactly how many requests you can make. This is basically one of the first things. Like if you're connecting things together, this is basically one of the first questions you have. Like what is actually possible? Like can I send this thing like can I send a request every 2 seconds? Also, I don't remember exactly where it was, but they say that you don't have the limit per token, you have the limit per account, I think, which means that you registered your application and you use your Sublime at home on Windows and maybe at work on Mac. You use it maybe on three machines, and I don't know, maybe you just left it on, and Spotify, you left your computers at home. People do this these days, right? So you have all of a sudden 3 clients that send requests, and you can set it up. The minimum would be 2 seconds, right? So every 2 seconds we send 3 requests, right? What is the limit? I mean, obviously we need to to do the whole OS2 thing to get to have our rate limit higher, right? But how high? This doesn't say it. So I kind of wish that it would specify how much. Another thing about the API is I noticed again, I'm trying to be really picky, not to complain. I'm not here to complain. I just want you guys to know, like, if you want to work with this API, these are a few things that I just noticed. Okay, so so I got Sublime over here, and it's working. So I got Spotify. Let me bring it in. Let me make it a bit smaller. So let me play the song The Unforgiven, and it's going to be here. So most people kind of forget that Spotify actually also has videos. Now, it would be kind of cool to know what is going to happen if I'm going to play a video. Am I going to see the title of the video or not? Let's just try. So I don't remember exactly where it is, but I believe if we go to genres and moods, there will be video at some point. Yeah, there we go, video series. I don't really care what. So I'm just gonna click play, and it's gonna start playing the video. But I'm sort of I'm not sure what I'm allowed to show, what I'm not allowed to show. I believe that Spotify sort of forbids me showing things like this. So I'm just gonna play it on a separate screen, and we're going to see. So I'm gonna click play right now. Okay, so it's playing right now, and it should say Kurt Cobain, Tin Spirit. Yeah, that's all it says. Kurt Cobain, Teen Spirit. It's in some sort of playlist or something. It's called Drawn and Recorded, right? But what we see over here is HTTP status 404, code 1, whatever this is. It says non-existing ID, and basically I have no way how to handle it. And I try to find an API for that. I just think they realize most people don't care about video or something, so they didn't really include anything. So basically, it's not in the documentation, and also the endpoint that we're using is experimental anyway, right? So they're still building it, right? So you don't expect too much. So another thing about it is that again, it's experimental, and I think I mentioned already in one of the first videos that when I started working with it, I noticed that the Windows plugin didn't update the REST endpoint. So whenever I would play a song on the web client, for example, or on my phone, then I would actually see the track title in the status bar. But if I was using the Windows client, and it doesn't matter if they're connected, if my phone is connected to the Windows client or not, that doesn't really matter. It was just not updating it. But we filed a bug, and in a matter of few hours, I believe. I think I checked it the next day, but basically in a matter of a few hours they fixed it, so it's kind of cool. But again, it's experimental. For example, I have Sonos speakers, and they can play songs directly, so without my phone, without anything being connected to them. As long as they're connected to my router, they can stream it straight from the internet. So they implemented their own client, and their own client does not update this endpoint, right? So it's just one of those things to know, right? I'm not here to complain. All right, so the last topic about Spotify is the OS2. So OS2 is a huge topic, right? I have an entire book about OS2, and it's like, I don't know, I don't want to lie, but I think it's like 300 pages or something, and I read like only the first 5 of it. So OS2 is a big topic. So whenever you're starting a project and it requires some sort of OS2, usually you never implement it yourself, because usually you either decide, okay, I'm going to do a library, I'm going to do this whole OS2, and people are going to use it, and most of the times you're never the first guy, right? So usually you want to use something and somebody already wrote a library for that. And again, it's a cool thing about the actually, hold on, let me play some song. Anything. Yeah. So now we play a song. By the way, it's kind of cool, right? So we wrote a plugin for Sublime, and it's supposed to stay the hell out of the way of our users, right? So if hell breaks loose, exceptions are flying around, we hit the rate limit, things are hanging, whatever, we just see some line in the status bar, and if somebody's annoyed, then they can actually, hold on, can I do previous? No, it just goes through my songs. I wanted to show you that we can still just disable the plugin, and then the user wouldn't even be bothered was this line. I'm sort of proud of this, user experience, because user experience is one of the most important things these days, because most things are for free, so you kind of fight for attention. And if people don't like your app, they, in the first 10 seconds, they will just uninstall it, because it's free. Who cares, right? They didn't pay anything for it. All right, so back to OS2. It was a kind of cool thing that they mentioned in their docs, which is, it's a common practice. To mention the APIs. So if you go to the main API, and then you go to the authorization guide, then when you scroll down, it says it over here, additional help. It says a list of handy wrappers and tools, and if you click, you arrive at this div here. There are libraries for everything already. There's obviously Java's everywhere. JavaScript these days just freaking exploding. Front-end world looks kind of awesome these days. And there's Python. You see, link to Spotify, the one that we used, which was kind of cool. Right, so the last thing that I'm going to say about OS2 and Spotify is that I was a little bit annoyed that we needed to do the whole OS2 cycle, because I was sort of hoping that we could generate some sort of webhook, which is a common practice for things like this. And a webhook would contain this token, and this token would never expire, and we would be able to use it for many things. But as I have shown it already, if we go to the authorization guide, basically, if I'm in business, if we're doing something real, this is the only way we can go with, because this is the only one that actually refreshes the token. Now, the whole goal of OS2 is actually to make sure that another application or another service or even another human being could use your account, but only a part of it, right? To do whatever you want him or her to do, right? So basically you're trying to protect your data. So there's this notion of your data being sensitive. And I actually tried, so if we go to here, so if we go to Spotify Web API again, and we click on endpoint reference, I try to find what could be so sensitive about this data. Like, what kind of data could we actually retrieve? And I couldn't find much. But I have to admit, I found enough for them to justify doing this whole full-blown API cycle, which kind of sucks for developers, but it totally makes sense. Okay, so if we go here to, I believe it's player. Yeah, so for example, player devices, you can figure out what kind of devices people are using, if it's active or not. You could find like names of devices. Maybe if you're in the same network, you could hack yourself in or something. There's another one under profiles, I believe. Yeah, profiles. So there's users, user ID, and me. And this one, so user ID gives you what does it give you? Followers, display name, so basically your name, image, Nothing, it gives you a name, so it's kind of, but this one is evil. This one actually gives you an email and the birth date and the country and a lot of crazy things, right? So if they didn't do it the way they did it, then this would be kind of dangerous, right? On the other hand, however, I'm not here to question their business and everything, but you kind of have to ask them: do they really need to expose this kind of information in a REST API? I don't know. All right, so let's go back to the third point, which is Sublime. So we're done with Spotify. Sublime. So I kind of like the community in Sublime. There are a bunch of plugins. There's a bunch of examples. I believe this time I didn't need to ask questions on some forums because I just had my answers. I had my questions answered from Stack Overflow and other places. So basically, there's still a lot of going on, and some people believe that Sublime is sort of dying, especially since the dawn of Atom and Visual Studio Code, and that's absolutely not true. Actually, I have a link here. Hold up. Okay, so it's over here. It's from some forum. So it's right here. It's from W-Bond. I assume it's William. It's the same guy who's I believe who is behind package control. He's part of the Sublime team. Look at the date. It's April 26th, and I'm recording this on what's today, August 28th. So it's just a few months ago. So their team is just not super open about what's actually happening, what's the roadmap is, but it's definitely still being developed. Okay, so Sublime is not dead. Right. So about Sublime itself. I kind of liked it. The way you develop plugins is kind of cool. You just drop Python files into a folder and it just sort of magically works, and there are hooks for everything. It was a very pleasant experience. It's partially due to Python, obviously. Again, it's kind of annoying that it sort of doesn't encourage the proper architecture or proper structure. It sort of encourages you to put everything in one file. By the way, there is this plugin called Package Reloader, I believe, that it basically keeps track of your files, and you can also change you can order them differently, and basically every time you would save, I believe it would reload all of these files. But I don't know, somehow it sort of partially worked, but it didn't work with the test somehow. Like the test didn't realize that something was reloaded. So basically in the end, I was it encouraged me to put everything into one file, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't mind restarting Sublime from time to time, but people actually do that. I believe I have, yeah. So there's this very popular plugin called Origami. So Sublime has those how they called sort of windows. So you can do this, for example, and you have 4 windows, or how are they called? Split screens or whatever, tabs. And it's kind of limited, so you can go to I think view, and then it's so they're called groups. So there's this layout, there's single one, and there are like 2 columns, 3 columns, 4 columns, there are 2 rows, 3 rows, and there's the grid that I showed you. So Origami allows more. It's very popular. Check it out. See, it has like 1,000 stars. Look at this. There are no folders. There's only one Python file. This one. 9 months ago, so it's kind of And if you go into this, it's 800 lines, I think, right? So everything is in one file, So I'm just not a big fan of this. I mean, I don't have like anything like specifically against it. I'm just used to building bigger projects. And yeah, my mind sort of stops working if I'm looking at like a huge file and I try to find things. Then I start noting things and I start to get like hung up on things. So yeah. Anyhow, so there are a few things that I believe could be improved. So the first one, the docs aren't that up to date. They basically there are some docs, and but they mostly encourage you to go through the existing plugins and to read their code, which is helpful anyway. Everybody should read code. Like every programmer should read a lot of code, right? Yeah, but having said that, I actually didn't have any problems finding things, right? So there are plenty of things on Stack Overflow and some forums, some blogs. Like remember this this teeny tiny plugin that we wrote that would open the console in the beginning of Sublime. I actually got it from a blog. I forgot about the link. I'm gonna try to find it. Yeah. Anyway, it was just a blog that described, and there's another blog that describes how to build Sublime. Like so there is enough information out there. It's just that it's not in the actual documentation. So another thing is that there used to be Sublime 2 for a few years, and then there was Sublime 3. So what I sort of it's not that I didn't like it. It was just kind of a bit weird because two projects are still being maintained. There's Sublime 2 that you can buy, and there's Sublime 3 that you can also buy. They're both maintained, and most of the plugins have already been ported a long time ago to both of them. But me, as a plugin developer, I have to ask myself, do I have to invest time? It's actually not much time, but still, do I have to invest time in researching how do I make my plugin work under Sublime 2 and Sublime 3? And it's not easy, because you sort of have this, when you're making this decision, you sort of have this mentality that I'm just gonna build it once, and then I'm gonna make it work once for both of them, and then I'm done. But usually it's not like this. So basically, every time you're making changes, you have double as many things sort of to test out. Right? You have to test every little feature in both versions. It's good if you have automated tests, but then you have to make sure that the automated tests work for both Sublime 2 and Sublime 3. It's also related to Python 2 and Python 3, which sort of split the community a little bit, because Sublime 3, when it jumped to 3, it also jumped to Python 3. It was using Python 2 before, which is just a thing that that you should be aware of. And in fact, our plugin, the one that we wrote together, has only one issue so far. By the way, check it out. It has already been downloaded 29 times. It's 9 times me trying it out, and then 20 of my fake accounts. Just kidding. All right, so let's go to here. We have only one issue, and this is the one that I mentioned in the previous video, where somehow this guy's Sublime was confused if it should use Sublime Python 2 or Python 3. It was over here, and hold up, lib os2 this import. So this one didn't work for him, and this one also didn't work for him. So it was just kind of weird. So it's those things that they're just sort of unnecessary, right? It's a cool Python thing to be able to do this at all, right? So if you're doing something like this in Java or in other static languages, it's not so easy to go just in code and be like, oh, if I'm at version this, then do this, or if I'm at version this, then do that. Or you can't do something like try import this and then fail and export that, right? So the next tiny thing is the testing framework. I didn't like the fact that I couldn't split the structure. Because usually what you would do, what I do these days is I try to replicate the same structure as in the source folder in the test folder. So I would want to have test/Spotify, and then in there test server and so on. I have to admit, I didn't invest too much time to figure it out, so maybe it actually is possible. You can change the name of this folder, but I don't believe that you can have a nested structure in there. All right, the last thing, which was I believe the most annoying to myself, was this whole packaging of packages or plugins. I have to say I wasn't a big fan of it, and I really trying to find a good reason to do that. So what I found was this. So it's actually under package control. By the way, it's not so easy to distinguish if this feature is coming from Sublime, straight from Sublime, or if this is a feature of package control. I believe it's coming from Sublime, but remember, it's the same guy in both teams. So I believe in the future they will be merged together anyway, which is good, because I remember having to convince a few friends to install a few plugins, and then I would be like, yeah, but first you need to install package control, and for that you need to go to some website and to do this and to do that. So yeah, which is kind of annoying. Anyhow, this page basically I wanted to jump to overrides, but the page sort of ends over here. Oh, by the way, see, yeah, it's the same guy. I was right. So over here it says, if a package for Sublime Text 3 is installed as a packed package, which is basically zipped, right? So remember we included this no Sublime package file, which made it unzipped. So, but if you don't do that, then package control will automatically create this file, and then it will be packed. Okay. So if it's installed as a packed package, it should be possible to directly override individual non-Python files. Right? So to do this, you basically replicate the structure, right? You create a packages/package name folder, and then you save customized versions of the files with the same name they are in the Sublime package file. I totally understand the use case. There are plugins that come with, for example, there's this plugin called a file icon, which displays those icons, right? The file icons, right? So I'm not saying that what I'm going to say is possible was a file icon plugin, but I believe that this would be a really good use case. So it comes with its own icons. You should be able to drop your icons in some folder, right? And then they will be replaced. So you don't need to be a programmer. You don't need to know anything about Python. So I get the idea. However, how would you do it? First, you would need to either find the plugin on GitHub, or it could actually be, even hosted somewhere privately. You wouldn't even have access to the code. I mean, you can always unpack. Just go and unpack the zip, right? Because it's there. So also there is another package called Package Resource Viewer that would do the whole extraction for you and then packaging back for you. I just didn't talk about it because I wanted to keep this as beginner friendly as possible. This whole series, okay. Anyway, I understand the use case, but in order to do that, what you would actually do, you would unpack the package first. You would understand the structure. You would understand in which folder to put it in, and then basically you would replicate it. So why would you do all of that if you have to unpack it anyway? So my only actual reason that I could come up with is that it's packed, right? So it's smaller, so it's better to for the network. But I don't know, I just don't buy it. Okay. On the other hand, it's easy for me to sit here and to criticize, right? Because I'm sure that they built this feature based on feedback of their users. So, they're sitting over here and they know much more about what the users want, and I'm just sitting over here just trying to figure this thing out, right? And to help you out to figure this out. I'm not here to complain. I'm not here to criticize. Actually, funny things. I follow Jeremy Jans on YouTube. It's a guy who does movie reviews, and in one of his videos, probably in many of his videos, he said, "I'm a fan first, I'm a critic second," and I really like that sort of attitude. And I'm going to try as much as possible to maintain this sort of the same attitude over here. So I'm not here to criticize, because software is an incredibly complicated topic. It's super easy to sit here and to criticize with a narrow mind. I don't want to do that. All right, so that was it. So I believe the community should not be encouraged that much towards packed packages. That's all I'm going to say. All right, and the last thing is Python. I'm actually very excited about this this part of the video, because I was super excited to use Python because, as I mentioned already in the previous video, I have never heard anything bad about Python. It's one of the very, very, very few languages that I don't hear that you don't hear anything bad about, because usually people are really passionate about technology, and I already made a video about dev wars, where basically people say, Java is better, no, PHP sucks, and all of that stuff. I'm gonna try not to do it here, okay? However, my main audience are beginners, and I wanna give them my opinion. For example, I'm always asking myself this question, as many software developers do: what is the best programming language to learn as the first one, right? And a lot of people say it's Python. And in fact, Python this year was the top programming language. Hold up, check it out. So there's this website called Spectrum, and there are many websites like this that do some sort of analysis. And check it out, Python is rank 1, and they try to sort of group this by type. So this one is web, this one is desktop application, these one is mobile, and these ones are probably embedded. I didn't really check it out. So there's, you should always take these sort of ratings with a grain of salt. They get their data from different places, and it's in general it's really hard. It's a really hard question to answer. Also, I'm not really sure. Like, for example, look at the second place, we have C, and they clearly separate between C and C++, and C# has a similar name, but it's actually a totally different beast. But anyway, they say that C is the on number 2 for mobile. So unless they count Objective-C, which I believe they don't, because it looks like they actually do have a separation, and I think they actually mention Objective-C. So Objective-C is a language together with Swift that is used on iOS, which is the operating system that runs on most on all iPhones and iPads, right? So if Objective-C is included in C, then I understand. However, if it's not, and I believe it's not, I cannot explain how C is on the second place. On desktop, I totally believe, but on mobile, how? I just don't understand. Yeah, so maybe they actually do include Objective-C. Anyhow, Python is a really great language, and there are different ways to learn programming, and there are different ways to approach programming from the first language point of view. To me personally, I wouldn't choose Python, not because it's bad or anything. It just that the way I like to learn, I would choose something else, something more sort of fundamental, more structured. I'm gonna get to it in a second. Python is a great language. I really liked developing in it, and it has a great community. I reached out to a few people in the community, and one of them, big shout out to Raul, I don't know his last name, who mentioned this video series in the Python Weekly newsletter, which draws some of you guys here. Welcome. I hope you like it, and I hope you're gonna stay. So I'm not here to piss off the Python community, right? I'm just just trying to be honest here. Okay. The first thing that I'm gonna say is that people shouldn't forget that Python is a scripting language. It was designed as a scripting language. It was designed. Again, I don't want to piss anyone off, but it was designed as a toy language, right? So it was just a pet project. It kind of grew and became very popular. It's it's number one, so it's kind of hard to argue against it. But yeah, it started off as a scripting language, and as a scripted language, it's the bomb. Like seriously, like if you compare it, like you can't even compare it with Bash or anything else. Like it's just different planets. So for example, if you're doing like Java or C# or whatever, like every time, like I've been developing for like 10 years now, and every time I want to write a file, I look it up. I look it up on Stack Overflow. Every time I forget. However, Python being a scripting language, it's just one line, no imports, no nothing. You just say open, you give it the path, you say that you want to read it as a string, and then you call read on it, boom, done. So yeah, as a scripting language, it totally rocks, right? However, all the other sort of features or paradigms or whatever, they sort of feel a bit bolted on top of it. Object orientation, right? So remember we did this pub sub thing. Here over here we're deleting something from a dictionary. So why are we not saying dictionary dot delete or remove or whatever? Why do we have another keyword in the language, and then we pass in a dictionary like that? I'm sort of nitpicking, right? I'm just trying to drive my point home that some features they just they just feel like they have been bolted on. Another thing was I believe it's actually in the same file. Actually, I should have it here. We should convert the message to a string just to be sure that it's actually a string. And yeah, so in object-oriented language, usually you would say message dot to string or something, and I believe something similar is possible in Python as well. But this one probably was there first, and it still feels kind of from the notation perspective, it still feels like kind of procedural style. The same thing for functional programming. This whole lambda keyword thing is very limiting. Where do we have lambdas actually? I believe we have lambdas in the tasks for the settings manager. See, we have lambdas all the time, and for this they work kind of nicely. And it actually Python actually has ETA expansion, which is a thing where if you have a method, you pass it in somewhere which expects a lambda, so you pass it into a higher order function, and the language will itself take the method and convert it into a functional object. So yes, it's kind of cool that works, but still it's very limiting. Like I can't even have two lines in a lambda, right? Again, I'm not here to criticize. It's just like one of those things that as somebody who would start his journey into programming, he would certainly get really fast results with a scripting language like Python or JavaScript or Ruby. But the way I learn it, I just prefer to have like more grounded, more fundamental approach, right? So over here it just feels like, oh yeah, just another keyword, just another kind of thing. All right. So by the way, I'm coming from the Scala world. Scala world. I'm coming from the planet Earth, okay? No, but I'm also developing in Scala, and I was happy. I was positively surprised that quite a bit of syntax actually came from Python. You could really feel it. It's, for example, in a Scala, if you had a function like this, you would also say def, and the parameter would need a type, but you would do it like this, some type, and instead of a colon, you would have an equals, like you would do in math, and that's it. The rest sort of stay the same. You could have a return keyword, but it's optional. Anyway, this video is not about Scala, but I was just kind of happily surprised, positively surprised by it. I sort of felt almost at home. Scala also has a syntax similar to this, but it's not for extending and for mixins. It's for constructors. So in Scala, you could just have a parameter here, and if it comes in, it's basically the constructor. Cool one last thing. Where is it? So recently, a similar thing in the Scala world is happening, which happened to Python, was this jump from Python 2 to Python 3. In the Scala world, there's this Scala 3 that has been developed, and they're promising that it's not going to be another Python, right? Anyway, check it out. There is this GitHub issue. So the Scala's development is on GitHub these days. Where Martin Orzechowski, who is the father of Scala, he says, I always kind of like the neatness of the Python syntax, and he said, it's not a big thing from the compiler perspective to allow this sort of syntax, and it's basically a proposal to consider the syntax. It would be a flag, so you could say, yeah, I want this syntax or that syntax, and it was just kind of funny. Yeah, basically the community was against it, just because you asked. Anyway, back to topic. One last thing about this indentation thing. It's kind of funny. It's kind of fun to write it, and I actually don't like braces myself. But I had to say, I copy pasted things so many times into the wrong scope, and that it was just not really pleasant. I'm also not sure how it would work in a bigger project where you have a bunch of people merging things together. I believe that this could introduce a bunch of issues. And by the way, we did it like very bare bones, right? We just have an editor. We just started hacking Python. There's a lot of, I'm sure, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of tools that actually assist in developing Python. There's this thing called Anaconda, which I don't really know exactly what it is. I believe it's a whole framework, whole tool, whole SDK kind of thing for Python, which I'm sure helps a lot. It probably helps to catch things like this and provides probably better error messages, and it can probably jump to things even though it's a dynamic language. So it's not all hope is lost. But if I had to choose, I would probably stick to braces. It just feels it's a bit safer. Another tiny thing about Python, which is kind of annoying, right? You can't argue against it. It's this whole self thing that you have to pass around everywhere. Look, I just marked it. It's just everywhere. And most languages that I'm coming from, Java, C#, Scala, all of these languages, they sort of have this thing implicitly in scope. So you don't have to pass it around. You don't have to call it like this. Another thing is the absence of what's it called, in this notion of information hiding. So you can't have things that are private and protected and so on, which is a joke in the object-oriented world anyway, because back in the day was with C, we had perfect information hiding. You had a header, you had the class file, the C file, and there was no way to call something from the file unless it's in the header. This was perfect information hiding. And then came, object-oriented languages was this, funny keyword. So anyway, not a big deal. Nitpicking here. I'm just, again, I'm just trying to be helpful for newcomers, for people who have, never seen Python, who just, want to have some sort of, opinionated view, and that's one of the problems in YouTube these days, that people are afraid to give opinions because they're sort of afraid that so many people are going to go in there and, dislike the video. Which is a concern, but still, I actually believe that for people who are new into something, they need these these barriers, these rules, these guidelines. They need opinions. hopefully, opinions that are based on some solid ground and not just hand waving. But still, I'm gonna try to keep my videos a bit opinionated, just to provide these sort of I'm trying to find a word like a foundation for newcomers, because otherwise, if you give them like two technologies and say, okay, so this is this thing and this is that thing, and this thing, here are the advantages and here are the disadvantages, and then there's this thing and here are the advantages and here are the disadvantages, it's kind of hard for them to see what does it mean. Like, you give them an advantage and they don't even understand why it's an advantage, because they're new, right? They haven't been in the field for a while, right? So even though you need a lot of experience to make a decision like this, even though somebody else already picked out all the advantages and disadvantages for you. Okay, so one of the last points is the imports. So Python being a scripting language has way too many ways to import things. Remember, we had problems with this. There's a way to modify sort of the path directly. There's also another way of the imports over here, with those sys modules. As some sort of improvement that I could suggest would be like, why do I need to let's see, hold on. If I'm over here, right? If I'm in Spotify and I have client over there, why do I need to import this? It's in the same folder. Why do I need to import this file? It sort of should feel like it's in the same folder and same sort of package. Why do I need to extra import it? And I sort of have an answer to this. It's because it's Python and it's a script, and scripts they sort of just run top to bottom. So if we had just some random code over here, so if it was not a def, right? If it was not a not a variable, if it was just code, just 1 + 2, or maybe printed out like this. This would be executed. So therefore, you can't just include this file into all the other files that just happen to be in the same folder, probably because of this. Which again, it's just a big sign that, don't forget, Python is a scripting language. So don't be upset with things like this. Just have to be aware. Basically, we're in the end of this video, and Jesus Christ, it's been an hour. I intended this to be like 20 minutes. I'm recording this for an hour, and I hope that when I'm editing it, it's gonna be a bit shorter. But anyway, the last point that I want to make is, because of this website, because of these stats like this, services like this that provide those evaluations, newcomers, they sort of look at this and be like, oh, Python is the best language, I'm gonna learn Python. I don't want to say there's nothing wrong with it. There's something wrong with it, right? They don't know that Python is a scripting language. They don't know that, huge things are not built with Python. I don't want to get into the whole discussion between, dynamic languages and static languages. And I'm sure there are some really big projects out there that are built with Python. However, primarily Python is used in applications like With It, right? Where you sort of glue things together. When you glue things together, Python is awesome. And Google uses Python, with this whole Google Home thing and everything. I'm sure they use Python for all these, automation, basically putting things together. Python is awesome. And for small projects, even small web projects, there's Django, this very beloved web framework in Python. People build, web applications with Python, and it just works. However, I don't have any data, by the way. It's just my feeling, my opinion. If you look into that, they probably don't have gigantic teams. It's probably like a small team of individuals that are really good in Python, that really know what they're doing, and they can, really maintain the whole complexity of a dynamic language, even if it's a big application. You either have to have, a small team or a small project to be successful with a dynamic language. And I know it's a strong opinion. Again, I already made a video about dev wars. I'm not trying to start a war here. I'm just trying to help newcomers. Okay. Yeah, I believe that's it. Actually, I went through all my points: the architecture, Python, Sublime, Spotify, all of this. I hope you enjoyed this video. let me know if I'm wrong. Like, you don't, there's no need to dislike this video if you disagree. You know, there's no special button for disagreeing. So if you're disagreeing with me, there's no need to dislike the video. Just please go ahead into the comments below, especially as somebody who has way more experience in, you know, with Python and with Sublime. And please let me know what I said wrong, because I'm trying to build a community here. I'm trying to help people who, you know, who watch these videos, and I'm not here just for the sake of being right. I'm here to help others. So if I said something that was definitely wrong, please post it in the comments below so that others can learn from it. All right, I hope you liked this video. Like it if you did, and see you next week.